This week and next week, we are going to be studying plants. I'm a veterinarian, so I'm all about the animals. And it really wasn't until I started teaching biology that I was learning about plants. Believe me, you think you know plants because plants are all around you, right? They're in your gardens and we eat them and we pick fruit from them and we wear clothes made from them. And so you think, I know plants. You don't know plants. I'm going to bet you don't know plants unless you've taken a botany class. Let's talk about them. So we know plants create their own food. By definition, a plant is part of the plant kingdom, one of the four eukaryotic kingdoms. And to be a plant, you not only have to do photosynthesis, but you use the pigment chlorophyll to do photosynthesis. Plants feed themselves. They are autotrophs. Plants here on planet Earth are also sessile, which means they stay in one place. There's really no reason why plants had to evolve that way. We may find a planet somewhere where the plants walk around, where they go, oh, I'm not getting enough sunlight. I think I'll go up on that hill, or they go one place during the day and another place. That'd be very cool, okay? But plants here on planet Earth they're sessile. They are also terrestrial. Plants do not live in the oceans. As a matter of fact, plants are also not something that can live entirely submerged. Well, that's not entirely true. Even the plants that live in freshwater entirely submerged, they are the descendants of plants that used to live on the land. Okay, so plants are terrestrial. Plants are always multicellular, and not only are they multicellular, but they have specialized tissues. They've got different structures. Now, the plants that we're going to be talking about in this week's lab, particularly the avascular plants, they are not this complicated. Plants got more and more complicated by natural selection over time, but they always have got specialized cells and specialized structures. This is generally a summary of the plant kingdom. The plant kingdom has got these non-vascular or avascular plants. The non-vascular plants are evolutionarily the most ancient, and in some ways they are the simplest, but these guys deserve mad cred for colonizing land, and we'll talk about that in a second. In this week's lab, we're going to talk about the non-vascular or avascular plants and vascular seedless plants. Next week, we will talk about the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. All right, so another of my major digressions, which is when you think about Earth, I don't know about you, but I think of it as a place that if I think about the most ancient Earth I can imagine, it was covered with some kind of a rainforest, but that's not true. We think the planet that is Earth has been around for about 4.5 billion years. And out of that time, the first billion years, there probably was no life on planet Earth at all. There were volcanoes, there was rain, there was some kind of an atmosphere, there were oceans, there was ice, there was probably mud because rain hits dirt, but no life at all. It took, we think, about 1 billion years before we got the very first bacteria, archaea-like life forms here on planet Earth. And then it took another 1 billion years, give or take, before we had anything that was a eukaryotic cells. Now, 1 billion years. So that was 1 billion years that some sort of other life form could have been visiting planet Earth just to check and going, nope. Another 1 billion years goes by, still nope, no eukaryotic forms of life. Now, after another couple billion years, 1.5 billion years, there were some animals in the ocean. And so there was a period of time when in the oceans, maybe for a couple 100 million years, there was an incredible amount of life in our oceans. fish-like things, worm-like things, soft-bodied things that might have reminded you of a sea anemone or a snail or something like that. There was not just bacteria in our oceans, but definite animal life and definitely seaweed kind of stuff in our oceans, but nothing on land. Okay, so from about 700 million years until about 200 million years, the oceans were filled with all kinds of life, and on land, nothing. Nothing but dry, dusty dirt. Not even anything that you would recognize as like the dirt from your garden, just the mineral kind of dirt. Nothing on land until the bryophytes, which are these non-vascular plants, the mosses, the mosses, the hornworts, and the liverworts, till they showed up on land. And then it was only after they showed up on land that they started sort of domesticating the land part of Earth, and then animals started showing up on the land. Okay, so we've got to really give a lot of credit to these guys. That's moss. Okay, mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. They showed up on land first, and probably for a while they had the land all to themselves, and then animals started showing up. And why did it take so long? Because it's actually very easy to live in the ocean. The ocean has got the same osmotic pressure as what's found inside of living cells. When you live in water, you can have a very soft body like a jellyfish, and it's fine because there's no gravity for you to contend with, right? If you're in the ocean, yeah, you're not dealing with any gravity. As soon as a jellyfish gets thrown by a wave up onto land, that jellyfish is toast. Why? Gravity for one thing, drying out or desiccation for another thing. There are a number of challenges that life had to confront in order to survive on land. And one of your challenges using your textbook is going to be to figure out what those challenges were and how land plants solved them. All right, so I will let you find those out mostly for yourself. But as land plants were trying to solve the problem of living out here, in order to resist gravity, they developed these things called shoots or stems that allowed them to reach up towards the sunlight, to outcompete other plants around them. They developed a waxy outer layer that kept them from losing their moisture. They developed roots that allowed them to reach down into the soil to find water so that they could live in places where they might dry out, where it wasn't raining constantly. And they developed the structures that allowed them to efficiently photosynthesize not just leaves, but because their leaves are now coated with wax, they need a way of getting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into the inside of the leaf. And so they need little mouths in their leaves so that they can breathe. Holy cow, it was really, really complicated, right? So where do plants get the carbon that they need to build sugar? We know they build sugar from photosynthesis. I hope you remember they use carbon dioxide, CO2. CO2 is the stuff we exhale. Or if you burn some wood, you make CO2. The CO2 is not very common in the air around us. In the air around us, is about 79%, wait for it, nitrogen gas. Who needs nitrogen? Well, we do need it, but it's mostly just an inert gas. The air around us is about 21% oxygen, and there's less than 1% CO2. CO2. So actually, plants getting enough CO2 to do their photosynthesis thing so that they can build sugar, so that they can build the carbohydrates that make the wood, that make a giant redwood tree. It all comes out of CO2. It's actually very difficult for them to harvest. Maybe that's why they like it when we talk to them, because we exhale CO2 onto them. Now, one of the things that might surprise you about plants is that they reproduce sexually. Yeah, that seems wrong. As a matter of fact, there are many plants, not all plants, but many plants that have female plants and male plants, not all plants, okay? But actually next week when we study the larger land plants, some of the larger land plants, they've got plants that make pollen and plants that make seeds. And so there are boy trees and girl trees. I know, kind of funny, huh? But we're starting off with just the earliest forms of plants that deserve our respect for colonizing the land. And they show a very rigorous alternation of generations. The alternation of generations is one of the ways that plants are very different from animals. So for animals, there are going to be female animals and male animals. The male animals make sperm, and the female animals make eggs, and those things come together to make either a male or a female animal, and that's the story of animals. That is not the story of plants, okay? The story of plants is this. There will be a plant. We'll make it, this is supposed to look like a fern. Okay, doesn't look very much like a fern. It makes something called a spore. The spore, when it hits the ground and the conditions are right, will grow up to make a little tiny plant. And that little tiny plant has got areas that make sperm and areas that make eggs. And the sperm will swim to the egg, and that will create another adult sperm. This is called the alternation of generations. And the reason is that the fern plant is diploid. It makes spores that are haploid. The haploid spores create a haploid little, it's usually a tiny plant, okay? And that haploid little tiny plant makes haploid sperm and haploid eggs, and then they come together to make the diploid plant. So that would be as if you, when you decided to have children, you sent out these things called spores that developed into little weird looking humanish things. And half of the humanish things that you made eggs, and half of them made sperm. And the eggs and sperm that those humanish things that you made, the eggs and sperm that they make, they come together to create another human. We would think that was weird. Plants think the way we do it is weird. All right? We will start here at the beginning of our next video.